Welcome back to the Girl, Your Brand's a Big Deal podcast. We are here with the phenomenal guest, Kianna Chennault, Esquire, and she's an attorney that believes that entrepreneurship is a civil right. So I'm super excited to talk to her about the legality of things, because if we're building brands, we need to make sure that we are legally protected. Kianna, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Tell us a little bit more about you and how you service the world.
Yes. So again, my name is Kianna Chennault, and I'm a business and civil rights attorney in Atlanta, Georgia. I've had my own practice for the last 3 years. Prior to opening my practice, I worked as a prosecutor in Fulton County, Georgia, which is where Atlanta is located. Mm-hmm. Fulton County District Attorney's Office is the busiest district attorney's office in the Southeast. So I saw a lot. I did a lot, lots of crime, unfortunately, in Fulton County. But I knew during COVID, I think COVID is when we all started to search ourselves and decide, is this really what I want to do? Is there something deeper? Is this really serving me? Because we got a chance to see just how fleeting life can be. And I knew that my time was up. Even before COVID, I knew that my time was up soon, because you get burned out in environments where you are prosecuting people that look like you and the victims look like you. And so I knew that my time was coming to a close. Opened my firm, and I have not looked back since. I do practice business and civil rights law. On the business side, we help business owners go from the ground up. So a lot of times I have owners who come to me with an idea, and we help them to form a legal entity. We help them to protect their brand via intellectual property, trademarks, copyrights, things like that. Also work with business owners who are unfortunately being sued or need to sue someone. Also do a lot of contract drafting and contract interpretation. And then on the civil rights side, I help people initiate lawsuits against government actors.
Her brand's a big deal, okay? Let's break some of this down. You said so much, and my mouth is just like, wow, I'm listening to people just share a little bit of their bio, and I'm just in disbelief. So it's just amazing what you're doing and the contribution you've created in this area. And I want to go back to this part about you being a civil rights attorney, because we're historically in a historical location.
Yes.
Right now we're outside of Atlanta, Georgia, but you were in Fulton County, and being a civil rights attorney in 2024, 2023, in the 21st century, with so much history in the location that you've been in. My first degree is in history, so I'm just sitting with that for a second. How was that? How did you determine what you wanted to focus on when you were in law school, or did you know when you were growing up as a kid? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. And I also love history as well. Big history buff. I like nonfiction novels, like totally me. But I did not want to be an attorney growing up. I actually wanted to go into government and public policy. So I went to Howard for my undergrad degree. I have a bachelor's in criminal justice and a bachelor's in psychology. So I really wanted to go into the criminal justice system and work on like reformation and fight recidivism. So I was definitely like a bleeding heart. And so as I matriculated through my college courses, I realized I could not be in the prison system. I could not be the therapist on the other side. I said, that is not me. I'm not built for that. And so I decided to shift a little bit and go more into like public policy. So I got my master's in public administration here in Georgia after I moved to Georgia. And again, thought I wanted to go into public policy, government work, and could not find a job in that arena after I got my master's. It was around, I completed my master's in 2012. Around that time, everybody was getting their master's in public policy or public administration or public health. And I just think the field was very saturated, but it ended up being a blessing because I said, okay, what am I going to do now? And so eventually made a decision to go to law school. And when I went to law school, again, thinking I wanted to be in public policy, government, use my law degree in a non-lawyer way, but I started taking litigation classes and I realized I loved the courtroom and I knew I wanted to be in the courtroom. Like I wanted to be like a trial attorney in the courtroom. So kind of shifted my focus from being behind the scenes policy making to actually being boots on the ground in the courtroom. Civil rights came about because when we interact with each other and we interact with the government, we have a certain standard by which we expect to be treated. incarcerated. When that doesn't happen, then we have a civil rights violation there. And I really got interested in civil rights after the Trayvon Martin case or the George Zimmerman case. It was supposed to be his case, but we know they put Trayvon on trial. And I just wondered what type of law would allow this man to get off with murdering this baby. And so Trayvon had a civil right. He had the right to be able to walk down the street and make it home without being accused of being a criminal. So cases like that is why I do what I do.
Whew, okay. I went to school up the street at the Morgan State University in Baltimore.
I'm from Baltimore.
You are?
Yeah.
Now I hear it. Now I hear it. I was just there not too long ago. I'll be in that area next week.
Okay.
So I love the DMV. That is definitely a place that has molded and shaped me. That's where I got my degree. And I thought about that too. So I thought about getting a public administration degree. One of my mentors said, you need to go into public administration.
Yeah.
I thought that's what I was going to be doing too. Government, policy. That's why I had the history degree. Then I knew I was going to do education, but I eventually thought I would run for office. Okay. And it still could happen. Yeah. You heard it here first. So that is so funny how things just shift you. And then also growing up during that 2008, 2010, we're in a recession. We got all these degrees.
Listen.
And there's a hiring freeze. That's part of my story. I was in Philadelphia for graduate school and for education, and there was a hiring freeze. I finished my master's degree in 2011. Okay. So around that time, hiring freezes, we were over degreed.
Yep.
And there were no jobs. So I ended up going overseas to work. I worked in Kazakhstan for 3 years. Wow. And then I came back to the United States. So I totally understand this story of like, this is what I thought I was going to do. And this is where life decided to throw me and just looking for those opportunities. So let's talk about some deep things. So you're in this area, Fulton County. I mean, I see some stuff because I watch Love and Hip Hop. I know that's not, all the information comes from Love and Hip Hop, but just watching some people go through the criminal justice system, and we know it's impacted. My background's in education. So I've been to juvenile detention centers. And like you said, like being in the jail, going and watching children where they go. And for me, I was at a juvenile detention center in Wisconsin. And the scary part about it was it looked like a school. And I said, I can't do this. I'm not cut for this. I don't want to send children to prison. And then they get here and it looks like their school. So that was kind of a coming to Jesus moment for me. I knew there was probably going to be some shifts in my own career because I couldn't go through that path. And in the education side, we talk about the school to prison pipeline. And I love how you have this philosophy of, in order to rid people of going to prison, entrepreneurship is their pathway, and entrepreneurship is a civil right. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, sure. A lot of our story is so similar. I applied to a job in Kuwait. After I got my degree, my master's, and I was like, still no job. Let me go overseas. So that's so funny. I actually got the job, but then the project was canceled. But so here I am, and not in Kuwait.
I've been to Kuwait. My brother lived in Kuwait.
Oh, yeah? That's so cool.
This is, we just connected. See, we were supposed to connect.
Yes. So, like yourself, when I was in Fulton County, like I said, Black defendants prosecuting people who look like me, Black victims, it felt terrible. And it felt like I was part of the problem and not part of the solution, because our justice system works the way it was designed, right? But being brown, we know it shouldn't work like that. But it works the way it was designed. So when you are part of the justice system, you're doing your job, but you're keeping that system in place. And so that dissonance that I felt between what I know to be right and what I have to do per my job, it just grew so much greater. And I say entrepreneurship is a civil right because I got to see firsthand the difference in how somebody with money versus somebody who didn't have money, how they matriculated through the justice system, what charges they received. The great thing about Fulton County, I'm not sure how it's run now, but back when I started, all the attorneys had to start off in something called the complaint room. And that's where charges are actually drafted. So we would get a police report in, we will look at the facts, and we would actually determine what to charge a person with. Well, I've seen certain things charged in Alpharetta a certain way versus the city of Atlanta. You know, I've seen police narratives written different ways depending on what area it was in, what race the person was. I'll give you a great example. And this is one of the reasons I knew I was on my way out, and I had kind of just started. I was working in the complaint room and there was a supervisor there. We received a police report that indicated that a female had been kidnapped and strangled by her boyfriend.
Ooh.
And ended up being a white female and a white gentleman. That case was downgraded to a misdemeanor. A misdemeanor battery and sent to state court. I had another case, several cases with Black men, same facts. They strangled, their girlfriend, beat her in the face and threw her in the car, and kidnapping and assault, that stuck. That became a felony case against that person. And I pushed back against the supervisor. I said, why is this being downgraded to a misdemeanor? And he's like, oh, that's what the facts support. And I was blown away. So have-nots usually are going to be your Black and brown people. So I've seen real time the difference in how people matriculate when they do not have money. I've seen the type of attorneys they can afford, right? And so as a prosecutor, of course, you're supposed to make the same offer to everybody, but we have bosses and our bosses have bosses, and they know that certain attorneys or certain law firms are going to push back in certain ways, or they're connected to certain people. And so the thing about being a prosecutor is the head prosecutor is an elected official. So that person is always trying to, I can't say always, that would be unfair, but a lot of times they're trying to please their constituency. And so that impacts their policy a lot of times. So I've seen the difference between money and not having money and where you're from. And so when we talk about entrepreneurship being a civil right, entrepreneurship gives us a vehicle to earn wealth, and we know that there's a great gap in wealth between Black and brown people and Caucasian people. And so entrepreneurship can help to close that gap, which can then give us better outcomes in the justice system. So that's why I said entrepreneurship, it is a civil right. It's part of our livelihood as people. It's how the richest families in the U.S., they got there through entrepreneurship. They didn't get there through working a 9-to-5. They may have did that on the side, but when we look at the Rockefellers and families like that, it's through entrepreneurship, it's through trust and protecting their brand, their intellectual property, protecting their name. That's how they built the wealth. So I would like to see us do the same thing.
Woo! I've seen some of this on the academic side. I got my degree in Wisconsin, and this was definitely a challenge. An overemphasis of Black and brown faces in the criminal justice system in a predominantly white area. So we overtly saw it. And there were years where like 40% of the Black male population was incarcerated. And I'm like, how is this possible? And just the experiences of Black children in Wisconsin, I had to go. I was like, I cannot stay here. Shout out to the people in Wisconsin. But it was definitely a rude awakening. And I absolutely saw entrepreneurship as a way out and a means to make things happen. When you have those financial resources, if legal things happen, you're able to be represented by the best of the best. You're able to negotiate. You have legal loopholes that you have access to. We've seen so many people, Black and brown, I'm going to say men to be, even more exact, lose in the criminal justice system just because they don't have the education or they didn't have the advocacy to prove otherwise. So I definitely appreciate your conversation of being a practitioner and advocating behind the scenes. I've been talking to Black women about different topics, even from grant writing and being on boards and being advocates for us. Mm-hmm. So I know we're advocating for entrepreneurship, but I'm like, we got to dominate everywhere because we need voices like you to push back and say, why is this the way that it is? In order for us to truly advance and grow, we got to be advocates and disruptive in across industries. So I applaud you for that work. And I want us to transition into something lighter because this could have been the whole conversation. Right. Like that's the work that we do and even our passions for entrepreneurship, going to HBCUs. We're advocating for Black people, and entrepreneurship is one of those pathways. So what are some of the challenges that you're seeing entrepreneurs have as they transition? New people that are just getting started, they want to get their business entity. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing people face?
Yes, I would say knowing what entity to select. Most people, they come to me, they either don't have an entity yet or they have filed an LLC. And an LLC is great for many people, but it's not for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so before I sit down and just form an entity, I like to have a conversation and educate the business owner. I'm like, hey, what are your future plans? And so what we learned when we were preparing for trial in the DA's office, we learned to start how we wanted to finish. So when I go to my business owners and we have a discussion, I say, what do you see? Like, what's your vision for your business? And let's start that way instead of starting haphazardly and then trying to build and pick up the pieces. Let's start how you want to finish. And so a lot of times that comes from starting with the proper entity. So I see that a lot. I see a lot of business owners with no insurance, which can be very problematic, especially if you're having events in person, you're doing things in person, you want to have insurance.
Liability insurance. Mm-hmm.
Yes. I also see business owners not protecting their brand or not doing research to see if that brand is available. And having to pivot midway or receiving a cease and desist letter, and then having to pivot or trying to rebrand or something like that. So I think just overall, a lot of times I see people rush into things, like they have an idea and there's like this rush to get it together and to make money from it. And I understand, especially if, that's your baby, number one. And number two, you might not be working, a 9-to-5 job. So you want to make the money. But I think if we could take some time and channel that energy into planning a little bit more, then we would have better outcomes for our businesses.
I love it. So what are things that are getting us in trouble? If you're already in business and you talked about litigation and, maybe having to sue some people, what are some of the things that you're seeing happening the most for entrepreneurs?
I'm seeing a lot of entrepreneurs not use contracts.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And I taught contracts for 2 years as a teaching assistant in law school. So I know contracts very well. It's like something I like to do on the side is like read contracts. I know it's very weird, but
we need somebody has to do it. It's not me, but it's somebody got to do it.
But a lot of us don't use those. A contract is nothing more than a communication device. And so we're not communicating about what our expectations are. A lot of times our expectations aren't met. And so a contract is just a written form of our communication. So I definitely advocate for that. But when contracts aren't used, then on the client side, clients aren't always happy. Well, I thought I was going to get X, Y, Z. Well, why did you think that? There's nothing written that says that, And then on the business owner side, we have people who may have a contractor and they aren't being servicing. So their business is lacking. The contractor didn't do X, Y, Z. And so, but that contractor doesn't have a contract or it's a poorly written contract. And so I'm seeing a lot of times where clients aren't happy. I'm seeing business owners who are not happy with services they receive, in particular in the advertising industry, in the coaching industry. I'm seeing a lot of on both sides. I'm seeing clients not happy. I'm seeing coaches not happy with clients. I see people not paying coaches. So I see that a lot. I do see some instances where people have not had insurance. And so it's come back on their business, which that's a good thing about operating as an entity versus a person, because it can go to your business and you can say, hey, I'm going to close my business, But if you're operating as a person, then those lawsuits, judgments can come against you as a person. So that would not be good. But I would say those are the two main issues: not fulfilling contracts both ways. And
let's go into these coaching situations that are happening, because I definitely coach.
Yes.
We have contracts. People breach contracts. And sometimes clients are unhappy. How can, as I would say, from the coach perspective, what are some things that we need to do to protect ourselves from people who operate out of integrity? And then from the client perspective, if they're not happy with their investment, what are some things that they can do as well? So I'm really curious from both perspectives, because I'm a coach. I also invest in coaching and mentorship as well. So I would love to know your perspective.
Right. From the coach's side, I would say, you said you have contracts already, but definitely have contracts. Be clear about what's included. So am I getting, 1 session a week for 4 weeks. Like, be very explicit about that, about what the person is getting. I would shy away from over-promising things. Well, I'm going to take your business from this to that. You might, but you might not. There are things outside of the coach's authority that, you can't control. So I would really just promise the things that I could control. I can promise you I'm going to give you 4 sessions in 4 weeks. I can promise you I'm going to be on time. I can promise you that you're going to get a full hour. But other than that, there are things outside of my control that I cannot promise. So I would shy away from making promises. I would have a refund policy. A lot of coaches encounter do not have a refund policy. So whether it's that person gets, 100% by, after 2 days or 50% after a week, I would have some type of refund policy. Because really, if the person is not using your services past a certain point, the coach is not out of anything by that person canceling. And so the one thing about contract law is compensatory. It's not punitive. That's unlike personal injury law, right? So if somebody gets into a car accident with someone and they were speeding, they were doing 30 miles per hour over the speed limit. Well, somebody can get punitive damages. The law would like to penalize that person because they were being reckless. But contract law is not that way. Contract law just wants to compensate what that person lost by the contract being breached. So for instance, if somebody's in a coaching contract and they cancel it the next day, the coach hasn't really lost anything. So why is there no refund for the person who received the services? So I've seen things like that. So we really want to make sure that we are building policies that's consistent with the type of law that will be used to interpret that policy. So I would say have a refund policy. I would say be clear on if you allow terminations under what terms. So is it for any reason? Is it because we didn't mesh well together? Like, under what conditions can somebody roll off the contract? So, and what is the policy by which they can vocalize their displeasure? So is there operations manager? Is there like a customer service manager or a number that they can call? How can those difficult conversations be had? Because a lot of times that's missing as well. I would say on the client side, realizing that a coach is not a genie. A coach is just one part of many people you probably need to interact with. And so I see that a lot as well. People kind of putting too much pressure on coaches and thinking they're going to have this 6-figure business in 6 months, you know what I mean? And thinking that solely coaching is going to get them there, which is not realistic. So I would say on the client side, have realistic expectations, number one. And number two, make sure you're clear on what you're getting. That's the same thing for the coach, right? Make sure it's clear to you as a client. What am I receiving by entering this contract? And then as a client, I will also like to see a refund policy. Do I have 2 days? Do I have a week to try it out to see if I like it? Because if that's missing, maybe I don't want to engage. Maybe I don't want to take that risk, So I would say that was probably the advice I would give.
I love this feedback from both perspectives because we have responsibility on both ends. Make sure you get your contracts. I'm actually in the process right now before this, updating our contracts to make sure that some of these pieces are more explicit and my deliverables and expectations are clear. So, and also being met. So I'm definitely a proponent of what you're saying. I renewed my liability insurance. I'm trying to get right. I'm trying to stand on business in 2024 because we're one lawsuit away from everything being finito. So we want to make sure we're covering our behind. What are some nuggets, maybe 1 or 2 things that you live by that have allowed you to be the person you are today?
Definitely keeping God first. I'm a believer, and I believe that as I submit to him, that God is going to completely order my steps. And he's done that. And it takes so much pressure off of me. Like, I don't have to figure it out because I have an awesome dad who's going to figure it out for me. I just need to show up. So definitely that. And then operating with integrity. As a prosecutor, you literally are holding someone's outcome of their future in your hands. As an attorney in general, people are coming to you in their lowest moments a lot of times. They're coming to you. They might be robbing Peter to pay Paul, just to pay you. You know what I mean? So people were putting a lot of trust in us. And so I definitely value integrity and try to operate in integrity, the fullest, highest level of integrity at all times. Because I also realized that maybe other people don't see, but God sees. And we know we're going to reap what we sow.
Other people might not see, but God sees. I love this. So tell us why your brand, Kianna, is a big deal. Tell the audience. We would love to know.
My brand is a big deal because I empower Black and brown businesses to earn and retain their wealth. And that's a big deal. It's a big deal to our generation, but also the generations to come.
I love it. How can we stay connected to you?
You can find me on Facebook under, and my coach is going to get me because I think it's different names and it's supposed to be the same name.
It's going to be on brand, but by the time this comes out, it's going to be on brand.
Right, by the time it comes out. On Facebook, I am Kianna Chennault, so just my name. On Instagram, I'm Attorney Kianna. On LinkedIn, I believe I'm Kianna Chennault, but those are the 3 main platforms that I use.
Definitely, we want to stay connected to you. What are you looking forward to in 2024?
So much. I actually have a big case that I'm working on. I did a press conference earlier this day.
Oh, today?
Yes.
Listen, the lady's a big deal. Congratulations. And thank you for hanging out with us after the press conference.
Yes, of course. But you will be interested in this case. It's a special needs student who was assaulted by a teacher. Yes. So I am looking forward to seeing that case through. Like that's a big case for us, for me. So I'm looking forward to seeing that through. I'm looking forward to seeing my kids grow more. I have 4 little kids, so I did. Yeah, I went like a whole 30 minutes and talk about them. But yeah, I'm looking forward to everything that they have. They have a lot going on as well.
Well, thank you for being here. Superhero, civil rights attorney. You know, we are our ancestors' wildest dreams, you know, not too far from Dr. King's footsteps. I mean, there's just so much. We're history in the making. We're now. So I want to say thank you for taking the leap of faith to do the things that you do, to advocate and hold people accountable that need to be held accountable for doing things that they've done in the world, you know, causing harm. And I appreciate you. Thank you for saying yes to being here. You know, we just put out a call. I put some messages in the chat. I always tell people, I don't give people much information. I just be like, here's a link, here's information. Yes or no. So thank you for taking that leap of faith, especially knowing what you had to do today to get here. So I am appreciative of you. Thank you, community. If you're looking for an attorney in the state of Georgia, are you licensed in any other places?
No, just in Georgia right now.
If you are in the state of Georgia and you are looking for an attorney, look no further. Listen, she's got your back. Kianna's got your back. Ladies and gents, please get your contracts in order. Make sure you have insurance. And again, stand on business. It originated in this area. Let's stand on business as we move forward so we can have powerful businesses and leave something behind for our children. Thank you so much. We are done with another episode of Girl, Your Brand's a Big Deal podcast. Make sure you stay connected and stay tuned in for our next powerful episode. Have a great day, beautiful people.